Welcome, Wargamers, to the impetuous young forests of the mortal realms, because today we are talking all about the Harvestboon Glade, one of the many sub-factions that exists for the Sylvaneth, who we've been talking about quite a bit here recently. Now, this video was requested by Casmine Animations. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that, but asked if we had any plans for a video about the Harvestboon, their favorite sub-faction, and 15,000 points of a Sylvaneth army is based on it. Oh man, what a collection. Yes, let's talk about the Harvestboon. They are a very cool faction within the Age of Sigmar setting. And so in this video, we're going to go through an exemplary battle, just some story from their battle tomes that pick out what makes the Harvestboon unique. We'll fill in the rest of the details by going over their specific sub-faction entry. And we'll wrap up the video by taking a step back and looking at the Harvestboon as a whole and just really asking, why is this cool? What makes them so compelling from a story perspective? Why would you want to own 15,000 points of them? And we'll do all of that really quickly after I shout out Not Just Gaming, an awesome store here in the US with huge discounts on all Games Workshop products, as well as carrying a ton of hobby supplies. So if you are looking to do your next army, your next hobby project, please consider using the link in my description below to get savings on AK Interactive, Green Stuff World, Gamergrass, Turbo Dork, all of it. No matter what you're doing, they got something for you, and every time you use that link, it really does go to supporting the channel. I get a piece of every sale, and it goes directly to helping me, my wife, our cats, the channel, all of it. And I could not be more thankful to everyone who has used that link already. And so let's begin our discussion of the Harvestboon with an exemplary battle. And this is actually harder than I thought. The 3rd edition battle tome for the Sylvaneth doesn't have a whole lot of information about the Harvestboon. There's not really a lot of sections where they're brought up specifically within their timeline. So I went back to the 2nd Sylvaneth battle tome, and there's a story in their little timeline section called The Stirring. All 9 root clans of Harvestboon muster to besiege the Foul Spine in Ghiran. Though many of the forest spirits fall, a band of tree lords tears down the Supperant Gate and hundreds of dryads pour into the Dreadhold. Putris the Rot Lord is left impaled on his own thorn-strangled battlements. The Willow Queen of the Harvestboon proclaims the victory, a new sign of hope. As if in answer, the soulpod groves of the Harvestboon clans across the mortal realms blossom, replacing the Glade's losses and giving rise to entire new clans. Now, you can see what I mean when I say I was really scraping for stories. That's the longest one the Harvestboon has, but from that, we are going to dive deeper into the faction and flesh it out a bit, so to speak, bark it out, whatever you want to call the Sylvaneth skin. So one of the things this story points out is they began their time with only 9 clans, or root clans they call them. You see, Sylvaneth glades can be spread all across the mortal realms, going from realm to realm in addition. Basically, wherever the forest grows, they just kind of naturally spread and drift. So there's not a necessarily single Harvestboon location, but at the time of their creation, only 9 of these little glades existed that were all Harvestboon. Now, one thing that's not pointed out in this story specifically is that they came into being during the Age of Chaos, making them very unique amongst the Sylvaneth. See, most of the glades we've talked about before have existed for several centuries. Many of them have warriors who have seen the Age of Myth. Remember, the Sylvaneth don't really age like we do. They have cycles, yes, and they do have to be reborn every once in a while, but I mean, a Tree Lord Ancient is truly an ancient being. So, relative to their kin, the Harvestboon are the young starts. They're only a couple centuries old, so they're young and impetuous and full of zeal and fire, right? Very optimistic, 110% enthusiasm, maybe like 0% planning. But this story does point out, and this does take place in the Age of Chaos section within their timeline in the last battle tome, that even though only 9 of these clans, which is a low number, and they're all very young, sprouted up, they immediately got to work. And this is one of the things that's hit upon certainly a lot in the newest battle tome, is that Harvestboon, for being as young as they are, the amount of accolades that they have under their belt, like huge military achievements of armies being stopped from deforestation or passing through the woods or assaults on Nurgle forces, they have accrued quite a bit of glory. They don't mess around. And I like this story because it demonstrates really what makes them unique. You see, the Tree Lords, again, Tree Lords can be pretty much of any age, will rush forward, and they smashed and acted as battering rams essentially to knock down the gates of a Nurgle fortress, which then let loose a huge tide of dryads. Now, the 3rd edition battle tome actually clarifies a bit that they have so many dryads that people will think there's some kind of illusion going on when the army rushes at them. It's like the forest is just kind of moving and shimmying and shimmering. But in actuality, it's so many dryads running at you, screaming, that your eyes can't really like separate them, right? You see the forest, but not the army of angry dryads that makes them up. So, like all Sylvaneth, they'll attack with like lightning strikes and hit and run tactics, but the Harvestboon take it to a new level by introducing swarms. They specifically want to swarm you with dryads. It tends to be their preferred unit. I think maybe because they are the cheapest and easiest to grow. And I say cheap in terms of the amount of resources from the soil and power that it takes to create a dryad would be a lot less than, say, a tree lord. But basically, you have a can opener in the tree lords, and then everything else is done by overwhelming numbers and pure aggression. Now, dryads are very revered in this spot. It's not like they're just churned out to be chaff. In fact, the Willow Queen of Harvestboon, the regent, if you will, the representative, the highest leadership position within this glade, is an exalted dryad. Another reason that they are very unique. There's something quite cool about having what is often considered the lowest rung of your society be in the position of power. Now, at the end of this story, we are told that basically in answer to their battle cry, whole new groves of Harvestboon clans erupt across the mortal realms, meaning they did this, they suffered a lot of losses, but now there's more of them. My assumption here is that Alarielle realized what was happening and kind of gave some of her godly might to the Harvestboon to have rapid regrowth. And that's sort of possible given the 3rd edition Battletome's emphasis that they have a stronger connection to the Spirit Song than any other Sylvaneth, more so than some of the oldest clans that exist. Now there's a few thoughts as to why this is, but you can immediately see why some of these older clans might be a bit bepuzzled. Or I should say glades, not clans. Clans is more of a sub-faction within a sub-faction type deal, but these glades that have been around for millennia are like, how come these guys get Alarielle's message and blessings so quickly? One of the theories is that they were born in the Age of Chaos, so maybe when Alarielle was at her most fearsome and fighty during the War of Life, before she became despondent, that's when the Harvestboon were planted and grown. So maybe they're kind of like stuck in that spring aspect of like, I'm ready for a fight. I'm going to get in there and just mess things up. And that's where they are. It fits their motif, their visual appearance, what seasons they seem to prefer or constantly be stuck in. But since the Spirit Song is such an integral part of the Sylvaneth faction, that's a big deal. To say that you are the most in tune with it means a great deal. In fact, since the Rite of Life, which is Alarielle's big power play to magnify life magic in the realms, the Harvestboon have had yet another huge wave of growth. So their glades, no longer are they just the 9 root glades, there's a ton of them. They are magnifying, aggressively and full of anger and zeal. Now, sometimes this will backfire. Their section in the newest battle tome is quite awesome. You see, Alarielle put the call out for life magic to be spread everywhere. She even created the new Spirit Song Revenants type unit to be able to spread the song. And, like many other factions in the era of the Beast, the Sylvaneth, including the Harvestboon, are headed towards places of acute arcane power, like waypoints, ley lines, all these kinds of things, places where the natural realm magic is strongest, and if you plant your flag there, typically the realm will kind of take on your aspect. So if the Sylvaneth go there and they plant a whole bunch of, we'll say Giran Realmstone or something, all of a sudden the forests will erupt around this place of power as it magnifies the power of life there. Well, the Harvestboon took this and ran with it. They love having the Spirit Song Revenants with them. Again, they're the closest to the Spirit Song, and so having a living beacon of it next to you sounds awesome. And they very enthusiastically rush towards all places of arcane power or ley lines that they can find and plant the flag of Giran there, so huge forests and new groves erupt into life, but there's a problem with that. They don't own all the land. And so, multiple times in Harvestboon's short history, relatively speaking, they'll go to a place. Oh man, this place is awesome. It's got all kinds of arcane power, natural occurring gear and magic. They plant the forest, and they don't think about the fact that there's a Dawnbringer crusade or an outpost or a city of Sigmar nearby, and the forest erupts to the point where it's out of their control. Right? They're just so excited to plant these things that they kind of are a little bit short-sighted, as kind of hinted at with the idea of impetuous youth. The forests erupt, and entire cities will be decimated not by the armies of chaos, but because uncontrollable life magic just detonated near them. Imagine you're just hanging out one day, right? Maybe you're just hanging out cooking hot dogs or something by a fire, right? You're a little frontier village, you're not doing anything crazy, and then huge roots, the size of a house, just creak and tear your city apart. Homes get lifted up into the sky because now every house is a tree house if a tree grows underneath it and throws it into the air. Your entire world is, pardon the pun, uprooted, and your city and everything that you fought for is destroyed. Now, these actions have led to multiple encounters of cities of Sigmar and Dawnbringer crusades, which I kind of use interchangeably now, are like, hey, that was messed up, and assume malice in it and begin attacking the Harvestboon Glade. As a result, you destroyed our home, they assume it's an act of war. They've already had treachery on the part of Morathi, why not Alariel? And so fights will break out. But here's the thing, is it's made very clear that amongst Alariel and all the other glades, and even many, heads of state within the cities of Sigmar, all realize that it wasn't malicious. They're just youthful and dumb, and they just weren't thinking. They understand their job is to excitedly plant forests and make the realms come to life, not so strong on the afterthoughts. And so, one of the things that makes Harvestboon unique is they will swear these unimaginably long oaths of service and loyalty to make amends for their mistakes. So they go to a town, they plant the thing, it destroys the town by accident. Maybe it was off to the side and they just honestly thought it would be safe. Townspeople are angry, and the Sylvaneth come in and say, hey, listen, we know you messed up your town. Super sorry about that. But you guys stay here and rebuild. You can be co-protectors of this new forest with us, and we will offer our services in case you guys ever have problems. And in a setting as dangerous as the Mortal Realms is, that is a huge deal. So many of these armies fight in isolation that if you can get a buddy system going, your chances of survival skyrocket, even if now you have a tree growing through your living room. And when we look at other situations like, say, the Living City, where it is very purposefully built to be up in the trees, we see that natural fortifications and systems of housing are very tenable in the Mortal Realm. So it's totally possible that this turns into a beautiful relationship of allied factions trying to survive desperately together. It just starts on a really rough foot. And so, as we kind of wrap this video up, I want to move into why is this cool, practical applications for us as readers or hobbyists or things like that. To me, the Harvestboon are the perfect representation of faction interplay. That is to say, in a lot of these videos that I do, I get comments that are like, well, how would this work with this other faction? Why would the Daughters of Cain ever work with the Cities of Sigmar ever again? And there's a lot of very obvious, points of friction. Because some factions just seems too dastardly and evil to reasonably work with others. But this is a perfect representation of that relationship where all of these armies, the Sylvaneth, the Harvestboon here, and say any given Dawnbringer crusade, they all have their own motivations and goals and ends and perspectives. And oftentimes, those perspectives are very, very limited. The Harvestboon are excited about going out with this stronger spirit song thanks to the Revenants and planting new glades and groves because it just is an exciting time for them during their rite of life. The cities don't tend to like having forests destroy everything they've built. And because our perspectives are so limited, we just don't see the effects of what we're doing in totality until it's too late. We can accidentally cross our friends, unintentionally, of course, but it can seem like a malicious act. And we see this a lot in the Mortal Realms, right? The Daughters of Cain taking Anvilgard. We got the Lumineth Realm Lords going around and just annihilating entire Dawnbringer crusades because, well, we need this area for a giant rune ritual thing, and in the end, it's a bigger act of good than the act of evil of wiping away your little pathetic crusade, so it's a wash. We're the good guys in the end, and we don't owe you an explanation. Whereas the Harvestboon deeply care. Like, they're motivated, they're impetuous, overambitious, but they're young and full of zeal, and so they don't mean any harm. They're trying to be the good guys, but when you have to work with so many different competing motivations and value systems, it gets real difficult. And I like that. This idea of being an imperfect ally is one we don't see a lot. Like, you're a good person, you want to do the right things for the greaterment of the whole, but sometimes it just backfires. And so stories like this of how factions accidentally fight one another or misinterpret each other's deeds is something that would happen quite often when you have armies as alien to one another as they are in Age of Sigmar. Now, on a practical note, I also think they make the best allies possible. Like, can you imagine if you made a Cities of Sigmar army? A great way to add a splash of Sylvaneth allies that doesn't have to be Living City is just to say, one of our outposts got rocked by Harvestboon, and now they've promised to help us. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to start an allied faction for Sylvaneth for that exact reason. And it's always nice when an army lends itself to starting a small collection, right? Just to give you that first little bump, and then you can think to yourself, well, I could do a whole Harvestboon army, why not? And then all of a sudden, you got 15,000 points and you're commenting on a YouTube channel to get more lore because it's never enough. I get you, I see you. And the last note I want to end with is this faction, more than any others, I think really plays up nature's ability to bounce back. An integral part of their story is their youthfulness because they were born in the Age of Chaos when things were at their worst. And the 3rd edition Battle Tome uses sort of a bit of imagery that I really appreciate, where after a forest fire and everything's been destroyed and the fire passes, some of the strongest shoots of what will one day be thriving forests erupt from the ground. Life comes back aggressively. Now, in my home, we are huge fans of nature documentaries. It helps us relax at the end of a long day. And some of the things that we've talked about lately is just, it's been crazy to see when humans leave an area alone, how quickly nature can bounce back on its own. I'm not trying to get into a nature documentary podcast here, but I feel like this army really typifies that. It's crazy to see how nature can heal, and so a faction that captures or tries to mimic that sense of awe is wonderful. Life is willing to fight to exist, and it wants to aggressively live, and so even in the darkest times, the Age of Chaos, young, bright optimism can be born, and it can fight. It can earn all the accolades that all the older Glades have done, and it can try to do its best to be a faithful servant of Alariel, a keeper of the realms, and an ally to the forces of order, although mistakes happen at all levels, and that's totally understandable, even if it doesn't seem that way from the Dawnbringer Crusade's perspective. For all those reasons, the Harvestboon is quite possibly one of the nicest Sylvaneth Glades, and you yourself should buy 15,000 points of it, just like our friend Gasman. And hey, if you wouldn't mind using the affiliate link below for that, that'd be wonderful. So anyway, thank you so much for watching and listening today. If there is a sub-faction or something you would like highlighted from one of the newer battle tomes, please leave it in the comments down below and I will get to it. I look forward to hanging out with you during my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Have yourselves a wonderful day and happy wargaming.